Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Tory MPs rally behind Superwoman Suella as the left and Craven MSM step up their smear campaign against the Home Secretary over a speeding fine and charity work in Rwanda.
So I asked the Minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
What's wrong with this country? We used to have proper scandals about sex or money.
I'll tell Rishi Sunak to ignore this confected non-scandal and leave his Home Secretary to get on with stopping the boats. In my digest next, then my superstar panel have their say. Tonight, I'm joined by Amanda Patel, John Sargent and Rebecca Reid. But as Suella unveils her plan to crack down on overseas students, is this latest Westminster witch hunt really about stopping a Home Secretary determined to take back control of our open borders? Nigel Farage offers his no-nonsense solution to the migrant surge shortly. And breaking tonight, the Partygate pitchforks are back out too, as Boris Johnson is referred to the police over new lockdown rule-breaking claims. But should cops ignore the woke blob and MSM's craven attempts to end the former PM's political career? That's our big debate soon. Also on the way, Prince Harry's week from hell hits a fresh low as he loses his latest High Court bid to use the UK police force as his own personal security team. So with this latest humiliation following so soon after their make-believe New York car chase turned them into a laughingstock, can the Sussexes ever recover their tarnished reputation? Tom Bauer gives his unfiltered take in Uncancelled, and star US journalist Megyn Kelly will weigh in on that too. She'll also react to this stateside Sussex bombshell from a leading Washington think tank.
We don't like him being in America, and we would love for him to come back to you or somewhere. I guess we, as Americans, we see Prince Harry the same way you see President Biden. You can have him back.
So are the Montecito Montas now global pariahs? Megyn, fired up and live shortly. Elsewhere tonight, as The Times reveals his future on the broadcaster is up in the air, and the newspaper suggests there are fears he will be booed and jeered. Should ITV allow Phillip Schofield to host the Soap Awards? Corrie legends Charlie Lawson, Debbie Arnold and Sean Ward do battle on that in The Clash. Also coming up, the search for Maddie McCann is ramped up again 16 years on as as UK cops join their German counterparts searching a Portuguese reservoir for a second time. But is it time to accept defeat and stop spending money on the cold case? Ex-detective turned investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas, who's making a fascinating documentary on the toddler's disappearance, reveals why the evidence he's painstakingly gathered proves this latest search is nothing more than a speculative PR stunt. He's got a lot of new information on this, Mark Williams-Thomas, later in the show. Plus, police side with eco-terrorists over hard-working Brits in the fight for our country's streets. That video sums up everything wrong with our country, I believe. And Lib Dem leader Ed Davey becomes the latest senior politician to fail basic biology.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
More on that faux pas in the media buzz. Tomorrow's front page is on the way too, and a new Greatest Britain Union jackass named as well. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. So we've now got two witch hunts operating at the same time in Westminster. They want to take down the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. They want to finish off the political career of the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. I'll bring you the truth about what's going on with both of those extraordinary stories this hour. First, though, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, in breaking news tonight, the former US President Donald Trump will go on trial in March next year. Mr. Trump appeared via a video link at the hearing in New York in the United States today over charges that he falsified business records to conceal money paid to silence the adult film star Stormy Daniels. He's pleaded not guilty to all criminal charges, claiming he's a victim of election interference. And also in breaking news tonight, Boris Johnson has been referred to the police by the Cabinet Office over two new claims that he broke lockdown rules during the pandemic. It alleged his ministerial diary revealed friends made visits to Chequers between June 2020 and May 2021. The Metropolitan Police have also received a report of potential breaches of the health protection regulations in force at the time at Downing Street during the same period. Mr. Johnson has written to the Cabinet Office denying rule breaking. Jacob Rees-Mogg says there are some people that will never rest until they've hounded Boris out.
I can tell you that during that period, I went to Chequers. I was invited there with my children, entirely in accordance with the rules. Another senior government minister was going to come, but the Prime Minister cancelled him because you were only allowed to have one family present at the time. So what would have been a meeting with the Prime Minister, the Chief Whip and the Leader of the House of Commons just had me there because you couldn't mix families. The Prime Minister was diligent about it. I'd also say that one of my children after lunch bowled out the Prime Minister and removed his middle stump, but that would be boasting.
Jacob Rees-Mogg speaking earlier. Now, in other news today, South Wales Police has referred itself to the policing watchdog after CCTV footage emerged today showing one of the police force's vans following two people on an e-bike before a fatal crash in Cardiff last night. Two teens were killed. They've been named locally as Kyrie Sullivan, who was 16, and Harvey Evans, who was 15. Violent unrest followed, in which 15 police officers were injured. South Wales Police has said a number of arrests have been made and they expect more to follow. Well, in happier news this evening, GB News has been named as Britain's most loved news brand in a top survey. GB News topped the charts for news in the highly regarded Brand Love study, which polls ordinary Britons for their views. And the People's Channel came out top in a survey of 45,000 Britons. It's been ranked as more popular than other major news brands, including The Guardian, The Sun and The Daily Mail. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So today, the Home Secretary attempted to get on with her very important job, given she is the lone senior cabinet minister valiantly fighting to bring down immigration, fulfilling a critical Conservative Party manifesto pledge. Ahead of disastrous net migration figures expected to be announced later this week, which could come close to a horrifying 1 million, Suella Braverman announced international students won't be allowed to bring their dependents to the UK unless enrolled in PhDs. Now, she says it is a bid to make a, quote, tangible contribution to reducing net migration to a sustainable level. In 2022, 136,000 visas of this kind were granted, up from 16,000 in 2019. So the government was right to say it is the single biggest tightening measure taken in recent years that will, quote, make a significant difference. But it's not even close enough. And Suella knows it. She dreams of bringing net migration down to the tens of thousands and stopping the boats by leaving the ECHR. Hence the craven and transparent witch hunt to try and force the PM to launch an ethics investigation because the woman got a speeding ticket and opted to take the points on her licence, having inquired as to whether she could take a private defensive driving course. But now, the ideologues at the Independent newspaper seriously think they've found the smoking gun. Wait for it, folks. The Home Secretary co-founded a charity called the Africa Justice Foundation with Cherie Blair, which trained Rwandan government lawyers between 2010 and 2015. Yep, that's it. That's the scoop that they think should be called Rwandagate and bring Suella down. Unpaid charity work carried out before she was an MP, which she clearly didn't need to declare. This is increasingly desperate activist journalism, trying to do the dirty work for the Labour Party. And sure enough, Angela Rayner ran with it today.
As ministers knows, the Home Secretary has already admitted to breaching the ministerial code by using personal emails to share sensitive government information. So I asked the minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
It was left to Tory MP Edward Lee to point out why this witch hunt is not only ludicrous, but a targeted smear campaign because of the Home Secretary's political ideology.
What's wrong with this country? We used to have proper scandals about sex or money, or about prime ministers invading Iraq on dodgy evidence in which hundreds of thousands of people die. Apparently this is a scandal, always moral outrage is ludicrous, that a minister asks her private office about something and she takes their advice. What's happened to the Osmothely rules? We all know what's this all about. They're attacking a good Home Secretary who's trying to attack the real scandal of mass immigration to this country. Give us support.
So why is Sunak buying into this whipped-up crap? It's obvious what's going on here. Prime Minister, you've already lost a loyal and effective deputy in Dominic Raab, who is now quitting politics altogether. Don't lose your Home Secretary too. Refuse to refer her for another stitch-up of an inquiry and let her focus on reducing migration and stopping the boats, then you might have a very slim chance of re-election. But to respond now, my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Patel. The journalist and legendary broadcaster too, John Sargent, and the author, Rebecca Reed. Amanda Patel, the witch hunt keeps on going.
Dan, I really don't know where we start with this story. First of all, we saw what was a completely orchestrated campaign by unnamed civil servants to get rid of Dominic Raab. And then the most important thing in that story was Rishi Sunak did not support him. Mm-hmm. And then we now have a bunch of unnamed civil servants trying to get Suella Braverman out. And again, Rishi is not supporting her. Now, how long ago, this story broke 2 days ago, how long does it take to work out whether or not, you sent an email that was appropriate or not? But much more interesting today that there's, you'll know of Gus O'Donnell, who was, he was the most senior civil servant. You, John, certainly know. Rebecca's probably a little bit too young. He was called God in Westminster. And he said today that asking a civil servant for advice on the speeding ticket, how she could handle it, and he said it would not break the code. When he was asked about the
charity.
About the charity in Rwanda, he said it was before she was even an elected
and it
MP.
was unpaid.
And you know, let's not forget that she should get a bloody medal because she had to spend all that time working with Cherie Blair. But I'm just thinking, we've seen it with Dominic Raab. We've seen the civil servants who come up. They decide, you know, they're just like animals coming after a person, and they're succeeding. And the person who's responsible for letting them succeed is Rishi Sunak. He's gutless. He's disloyal. He proved that when he stabbed Boris in the back. And I just think he is the one, unless he just says, clears this quickly, the Tories are just over.
Well, as I've been saying now for a long time, the deep state are just working in tandem with the Guardian newspaper. So this news story has just dropped, John, and it's just an example, actually, of what the Guardian are doing, how they're working with the woke blob. This news story says, Suella Braverman had to be fact-checked in cabinet meetings, according to civil servants. They say she repeatedly got things wrong, including during cabinet talks about King Charles's coronation in March and in meetings held this week on migration. And they say she made basic errors, and they had no such similar problems when Priti Patel ran the Home Office. Now, I seem to remember The Guardian launching a similar hate campaign against Priti Patel.
Yeah.
Once she's gone, all of a sudden they turn their focus on Suella Braverman. How dare civil servants be leaking private discussions taking place in cabinet meetings to The Guardian, not to reveal any stories, but to try and prove an incorrect fact that the Home Secretary is somehow incompetent?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think, for me, the simple point is, what did she actually do? Not, let's kill the messengers. I think the idea that you shout at the messengers is mistaken politics. I think what you've got to do is say, politics is a rough business, all sorts of things come out. What did come out? What did actually happen? Rishi Sunak has now got to make a decision, as you say, on these particular items, not rant on about the blob and all that.
OK, well,
That's
can
not
I
a good
ask
idea.
you a question, though, about the Messenger?
OK.
Because you were legendary BBC political editor, right? Now, how did you feel about your contemporary after all of these days of very important discussions at the G7 in Japan about international security, about China, about the economy? How did you feel about the BBC political editor getting up and asking the Prime Minister in that context a question about a speeding ticket? And then, by the way, the political editors of ITV News and Sly News followed up asking a question about a speeding ticket. John, I know you don't want to shoot the messenger, but you must agree we've got a really troubled mainstream broadcast media if that's their priority.
Well, if you... could I just side that argument? Because I think the key argument, much more interesting in a way, is what will Rishi Sunak do and what should he do about Suella Braverman?
He should ignore this, shouldn't he?
In fact, the politics of it are quite straightforward. He would be mad politically to get rid of her.
Yes.
Absolutely mad.
Suicidal.
She is taking all the flak now over the most controversial aspect of the government policy. She takes it every single hour of the day, and if he then punches her in the back, it would just be ridiculous.
Which is the only person that the right of the party actually trust. And Rebecca Reid, even you, from a left-wing point of view, must admit now that this is just campaigning activist journalism by The Guardian to try and bring down a Home Secretary because they don't agree with her political views.
That's not what's happening. There's two things happening here. One, journalists are doing their job. They're looking at stories. They're finding things that are appropriate and inappropriate. Now, I would say that the Rwanda thing and the speeding ticket thing are totally different. I cannot find how a woman having done some charity work before she was an MP is a problem. Possibly, when she was exposed to Rwanda, benevolently, the explanation would be she thought it was a great country and she wanted to work with it in future. That's not a crime. Rwanda, let it go. Speeding ticket.
Well, the Independent were trying to say this was Rwanda Gate today.
And which is mistaken, and I think about traffic. The web kind, not the driving kind. The thing that is a problem is that she is doing the classic thing where she doesn't think the rules apply to her. She got a speeding ticket. She didn't want to have a speeding ticket. She asked a naughty question that she shouldn't have asked. It's like seeing if somebody else can take your points. Yes, lots of people do it. It is naughty.
How terrified must it be for ministers now if they feel they can't even ask a question of
or
their
they can get
civil
away with
servants?
something naughty, though.
No, it's actually not naughty because
It's a bit naughty.
anybody, it is completely legal.
I bet you would do it if you had to do a defensive driving course. You'd say, where's my private session?
I would not say that, Dan. I would say I'd be back with the naughty ones at the back, smuggling in a bit of vodka and having a really fun time.
But also,
the point
no,
is,
she went further than just asked a civil servant. That was the problem. It was quite obvious the Cabinet Office were involved.
Yeah.
And in this heightened atmosphere, the Cabinet Office is so worried about getting involved in politics.
Can I say this is a really important point here? Lawyers have said there is nothing illegal in what she did.
Not illegal, but naughty,
celebrities
immoral.
and people of high
Incompetent.
even you or I, Dan,
we could do
get
it.
a
But it's
private.
it's a very...
It's completely legal.
Lack of experience,
but immoral.
not a good
It's not
idea.
Immoral. I think
Absolutely
it is immoral.
rubbish.
Not immoral.
Amanda Patel, John Sargent, Rebecca Reid, and we're going to be coming to the Boris Johnson witch hunt soon when my superstar panel join me later. But coming up, as shock figures show the government is now hemorrhaging £1.3 billion housing asylum seekers amid warnings net migration is going to hit 1 million. Is Suella all that stands between us and an open borders nightmare? Nigel Farage on that soon. But next in The Clash, as it's revealed his broadcasting future is up in the air, with the I newspaper reporting bosses fear another appearance could see him booed and jeered. Should ITV still allow Phillip Schofield to host the Soap Awards? Well, we've got some soap legends to debate this. Coronation Street's Sean Ward, Charlie Lawson and Debbie Arnold. But what do you think? Dan at gbnews.com or vote in our poll at gbnews on Twitter. Debating Phillip Schofield after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Nigel Farage and Megyn Kelly both coming up, but first the clash. And Phillip Schofield's bombshell weekend announcement that he would be leaving this morning with immediate effect was seemingly softened by his insistence that he would continue to work closely with ITV, including hosting duties at this year's British Soap Awards and the promise of a brand new peak time series. But doubts continue to hang over his broadcasting future, with sources telling the Times newspaper that they would, quote, be extremely surprised if we see him on the channel after the Soap Awards, which are a bit of a second-tier show. He will end up on a rival channel making documentaries about railways. And ITV insiders reckon even the Soap Awards could be off the table, with reports in The Eye revealing fears that Phil could be booed and jeered by the live audience up in Manchester next weekend, leaving ITV and Schofield himself open to further humiliation. So maybe he shouldn't be there at all. What do you think with his future with the broadcaster up in the air and suggestions that he could be booed? Should ITV allow Phillip Schofield to host the British Soap Awards? Dan at gbnews.com. Vote in our poll at gbnews on Twitter. But let's debate this now with our soap star supremos, former Coronation Street bad boys Charlie Lawson and Sean Ward, and the wonderful Debbie Arnold, who, let's be honest, she's appeared in basically all of them. Now, Debbie, you don't like the idea of having tainted Phillip Schofield hosting your soap awards, do you?
Well, it's not tainted Phillip Schofield as much as the fact that it will all be about him and not about these other poor actors who spent years trying to get these awards. And it'll just be about Phillip. Nobody will even be looking at them. They'll just be looking at him the whole time.
And you're hearing that actors would be upset about having Phillip in that hosting role?
Well, I don't think they would be upset. I mean, the thing is that he hasn't done anything to harm anybody, any actors, really. Well, I don't think so. But I think that they will definitely want the evening to be about them. And surely, if he hosts it, it will be about him. Don't you agree?
Well, indeed. And Sean Ward, folk are saying actually he could end up being booed at that event. I mean, do you have a problem with it, Sean?
It's not that I've got a problem with it, but I do agree. It's, Soapland work hard. They put out a lot of, it's like a feature film a week. Don't get me wrong. The quality of Soapland has dropped over the last few years with the kind of stuff they've been putting out. But in general, if the host was to tarnish that work or distract from it, I think, ITV really shouldn't allow that to go ahead. It's not even necessarily on the actors or Phil's choice. But,
And Sean, you say that Phillip Schofield lacks integrity. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's not that, I can't speak personally. This industry, you hear a lot about people and you can't believe everything you read in the press. But assuming Phil is gay, I suppose you could say he's lived a double life for quite some time of his life. And in a consequence of that, some would say, he's not fully in integrity. But I understand it's difficult coming out of the closet. So there is elements to it. But who's the mysterious boyfriend? At the time of that, I felt sorry more for his wife than anything. But, with so much going on, I hate to bring it up, but his brother was convicted of 11 sexual child offences in April. And this is, hanging around him. And we don't know why he's fallen out with Holly. We don't really know why he's been kicked off this morning. So, I think they should protect
Charlie Lawson, isn't that a point? He's mired in scandal. He's fallen out with Holly Willoughby, and it feels like ITV are basically saying, oh, but don't worry, you can go and host the Soap Awards because no one cares about those. It's not really the right approach, is it, Charlie?
Well, look, listen, you mustn't forget behind all this, and nice to see you both folks there. ITV are friggin' stupid, you know what I mean? They know if there was any danger of this show falling on its arse, then Philip would be not part of it. But there are many things that will protect themselves as a company. The first thing is, I mean, I was honoured a few years ago presenting the first Tony Warren Award to James Bain, God rest his soul. And there is a 2-minute window of edit because they cut out one friggin' sentence I said about how much I liked the man, which hadn't been written by their lovely little scriptwriters, so they all got in a tiz and cut it. So there is a vehicle for cutting it. I don't think for 1 minute the Soap Awards are anything like the Oscars, the BAFTAs, or the Olivier's. I can't see any actor from EastEnders, Coronation Street, or Emmerdale Farm saying a bloody boo to a goose, because they're not like that. They do, Sean, you're right, they work extremely hard, but most of them couldn't spell politics and care even less. So I think that there'd be nothing coming from the platform. You might get somebody who comes on to present a prize who probably thinks, here's my big bloody moment, I'm going to get the knife in. But do you know what? In my experience, Philip, I know he's been bloody awful to you, and Eamon, my best mate, one of my best mates, got a bucket of shit off him. But basically, most actors, I think, have been treated all right by him. I haven't really met any actors or actresses, Debbie, although Debbie, who have had a bad time from him. So I expect it will all go off without a hitch. And to be honest with you, I hope I'm right, because as Sean said, there's an
of course it's got to be about the Soap Awards.
Very hard.
Exactly, it's got to be about the Soap Awards. Not about Phillip Schofield. But Debbie, you say what's happened to Phillip Schofield is karma because he was mean to Fern Britton and it's all come back to bite him on the behind. What do you mean by that?
Well, the thing is, it's all sort of gone like that. First of all, it started with John Leslie, didn't it? He went out and then Philip was brought in by Fern. And then Fern was booted out, wasn't she? And apparently that was something to do with Philip. Yeah. And now Philip's gone, and that's something to do with Holly. But what worries me now, guys, we're going to look at something completely different here. What happened to Caroline Flack? What happened to her when she was, absolutely vilified? And this is what's happening to Philip at the moment. I mean, everyone's having a go. Nobody really knows what's happened. Do you not worry slightly? I know you don't like him, but do you think his mental health will be, shattered by this?
I guess obviously you always worry about how people will cope with these sorts of situations. At the end of the day, though, what I would say, Sean, is that I've seen Philip do this to so many people in the industry, so many people. He's ruined their career. He's banned them from appearing on shows. So, Sean, I guess if you play with fire, sometimes you get burned.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the Soap Awards, obviously, before, and I'll take my hat off to Phil. He does deliberately get you in and out quick because the Soap Awards aren't that exciting. And he says it when he starts. He says, don't worry, you'll get to the bar as quick as I can get you there. And from my perspective, I've always respected him, but there is so much going on behind the scenes that none of us have a clue about.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to kind of wait a little bit.
Indeed. Well, no, I have some idea. I have some idea, but it's a fascinating story.
I know you've got the idea, Dan, but we want to know what it is. Can I meet you secretly and you can tell me?
Yes, we can absolutely do that. Our Soap Supremos,
well, if he did know about his brother, then I will say that's not a very good thing.
Indeed. Charlie Lawson, Sean Ward, Debbie Arnold, thank you so much. So what do you think? Should ITV allow Phillip Schofield to host the Soap Awards? From Philip on Twitter. Wonder if his last name's Schofield. Yes, if they want him, and they should be prepared to accept the consequences, why not? From Annie, I personally feel this would be a very bad move on ITV's part. Public support for him is not great at the moment, and he is best out of the limelight for a while. And from Fred, yes, let him be booed and jeered. Let him know what people think of him. And your verdict is now in. Just 22% of you think ITV should allow Phillip Schofield to host the Soap Awards. 78% think he should stay away. Coming up, as Prince Harry loses his bid for oligarch-style security every time he lands in the UK, and a leading Washington think tank reveals Americans want the whining Duke gone from their shores, has the Sussexes' fake New York car chase turned them into global pariahs? Superstar US journalist Megyn Kelly with me soon. The next, as shock figures show, the government is now hemorrhaging £1.3 billion housing asylum seekers, while Superwoman Suella unveils a fresh crackdown on overseas students. Is our Home Secretary now all that stands between us and an open borders nightmare? And is that why they all want her gone? Nigel Farage live on that in just one moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Megyn Kelly on Prince Harry's major defeat against the UK government coming up. But it's time now for What the Farage, and the Home Secretary's bid to stop Britain's migrant surge continued today with a pledge to crack down on overseas students bringing family members to the UK from January 2024. Suella Braverman said the economic benefit of foreign students should not come at the expense of Tory manifesto promises to slash migration. But the tough plan came as ministers braced themselves for eye-watering net migration migration numbers to top a staggering 1 million people this year. The record high figure, made up of those entering the UK minus those leaving, is set to eclipse the previous peak of 504,000 set in the year to June 2022. So, Nigel, look, folks seem out to get Suella Braverman this week. There's been a lot of claims that I believe is spurious. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that she seems to be the only person around that cabinet table who genuinely wants to reduce net migration?
Yes, I think her problem is twofold. Number one, of course, the Blob want to get her, and they're doing very well, aren't they? They've got Dominic Raab out of politics. Boris Johnson, yet more reports going into the police today. I mean, goodness knows why now. So, yes, of course. But, Dan, here's the big one. The real truth is the Tory party want to get rid of her too. Please do not believe any rhetoric you hear from any modern-day Conservative Prime Minister that they want to reduce net migration. They don't. It is the great immigration lie put to us in general elections in 2010, 2015, 2017, but worst of all, 2019. Johnson, having made the pledge to reduce numbers, and we had some very interesting insight from Nick Timothy, a former number 10er this week. He actually phoned his ministers to say, don't campaign on this. I don't believe in it. Who put in place the most liberal immigration system in the world post-Brexit? Boris Johnson. You can come into this country and take certain jobs on £10,000 a year less than the minimum wage. So much for skilled migration. Who put in place the idea that students could bring dependents? So the university gets the money, but the country has to pick up the health bills and everything else. I'm sorry to say, and I think this Thursday will mark a moment when we know we cannot believe the Conservative Party on immigration, and when the argument, well, Labour would be worse, doesn't hold any water anymore. Suella Braverman, I think, is genuine.
She is.
Sincere.
Yeah.
Actually believes in what she says, and that makes her an inconvenience. I mean, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, wants unlimited numbers.
Yeah. She says bring them in. Well Nigel, it's funny. It's as if Rishi Sunak's been listening to you, Nigel, because he has begun the damage control right now. I have just been handed a piece he is writing for tomorrow's Daily Telegraph. Let me share some of it with you, Nigel, and you can react for the first time live on air. Sunak says it's not just a question of legality. We can't have uncontrolled legal migration either. That's unfair too. It leads to unmanageable pressures on housing, schools and hospitals in many of our communities. And when it is too high and too fast, it can make it difficult for communities to integrate new arrivals. I mean, he could be reading a monologue from the Nigel Farage show on GBNews, but you're saying we can't trust what he's saying.
Well, isn't that remarkable from a career politician? Tell the people what they need to hear at the last minute. By the way, is this the same Rishi Sunak who on the plane to the G7 in Japan just a few days ago wouldn't commit to reducing net migration to below 500,000? I do not believe a word this man says. I think he is the most insincere spinner we've seen since Tony Blair in number 10. He doesn't believe a word of it, but that's okay. Feed red meat to the voters, forget our past failures, and election after election, we believe them. I don't believe after Thursday we will anymore. This is all the great Conservative immigration lie. And I'm sorry to use that word, but I really mean it.
Nigel, can I just take one moment to ask you about a story closer to home? In the last hour, it has been revealed that GBNews has been named the favourite, the most loved news brand in the UK in this massive annual survey by Savanta, which actually takes into the account the feelings of more than 40,000 people. I mean, this is not a small sample. This is a major poll. And we've beaten The Guardian and The Sun newspaper, which are in number 2 and number 3 positions. I mean, Nigel, you were on my first ever show on this channel, which was nearly 2 years ago. I'm sure you remember after that night, Nigel, they said we were finished. You know, there were predictions in newspapers like The Guardian that we wouldn't even make it to 3 months. And now the People's Channel is the favourite news brand in the UK. The story of GB News is a pretty incredible one, isn't it, Nigel?
It's a line I used once before in the European Parliament, a couple of days after the Brexit vote. But I said, when I came here years ago and said we'd leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, when they said GB News was finished and they laughed at us, I tell you what, Dan, they're not laughing now. And I think it's tremendous. I actually can't believe it, because of that 45,000, I bet a lot of them still didn't know we even exist. So what's happening here is those that come to GB News and find GB News absolutely love it. And I think, and you know, our real success is we've established a brand, and we're fair and we're open. We have debate from all sides, and sometimes it's pretty heated stuff, but it's real. It's the kind of debate that goes on in families, certainly in mine, and in pubs and wherever we go. And if we would manage to achieve this with 45,000 people selected by Samantha on a scientific basis, when I bet half of them don't even know who we are, then it just goes to show the channel has amazing potential. This is a great moment. It really is. 2 years on from Andrew Neil walking out, from
don't remind me
taking the knee. I mean, it was. I could choose my words carefully. It was a catastrophe. It was a something show. And so this really is an absolute feather in the cap. I'm thrilled. Yeah. You're thrilled. And I think the rest of the media industry are going to go, oh, my goodness gracious me. Yeah. And let's hope that the advertising industry, and let's remember this, many of whom boycotted GB News before a minute of airtime had been put out, let's hope they come to their senses too.
Absolutely. Very well put. And of course, we have to thank our incredible family of viewers, because without them, we are nothing. Nigel Farage. It was very heated at the top of your show tonight, heated but fair, so I recommend people check that out at midnight if they missed it. Nigel, thank you so much. But coming up, as the Partygate witch hunt continues with Boris Johnson referred to the police over new lockdown rule-breaking claims, should cops ignore the woke blob and MSM's craven attempt to end the former PM's political career? My superstar panel return to debate that soon. But next, as Prince Harry loses his bid for oligarch-style security every time he lands in the UK, and a leading Washington think tank reveals Americans want the whining Duke gone from their shores, has the Sussexes' fake New York car chase turned them into global pariahs? Superstar US journalist Megyn Kelly, she's live with me on this in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Time now for US media superstar Megyn Kelly, and breaking tonight, one of the most disastrous weeks of the Sussexes' 5-year marriage has just got a hell of a lot worse as sullen Prince Harry loses a high-profile court case against the UK government. And yet another of his pathetic public legal wrangles, the Duke of Delusion, failed in his high-profile bid to bring a challenge against the Home Office over its refusal to allow him to pay for police protection while in the UK. Now, the blow comes less than a week after the Sussexes' overhyped New York car chase was globally exposed as a farce, which experts now believe has fueled increasing American sentiment for the Ginger Whinger to permanently return to Britain. So this is the moment. Kevin Roberts, he's the president of the highly respected Washington think tank, the Heritage Foundation, told the Daily Telegraph that just 2 to 3% of Yanks actually like the Montecito Moaners.
2 or 3% of the population that loves the nonsense that Harry and Meghan spew. You don't have to worry about Americans being on their side. They're on Britain's side. Should he be deported? We don't like him being in America, and we would love for him to come back to you or somewhere. I guess we, as Americans, we see Prince Harry the same way you see President Biden. You can have him back.
Megyn Kelly. So look, has this fairy tale car chase finally destroyed their reputation stateside, even amongst their previous craven supporters like CNN and the New York Times?
It absolutely has helped. It's helped. Even The View and Whoopi Goldberg, these are far left people, are saying this is absurd. What a ridiculous story. You know, I've been thinking about it, Dan. One thing you don't do is you don't mess with New Yorkers and the city of New York, right? You don't come into New York, make up lies about the photographers who work here and make their livings here, and try to paint yourself as a victim when you weren't. This is a city that got knocked down on 9/11/2001 and lost 3,000 people and went back to work and told everybody, get out the next day, buy a stock, do something to help the city get back on its feet, that had the New York City Marathon with people holding the flag. This is a city that rises up after they've actually been hit and hurt and are wounded. They don't appreciate whiners who, when they're not even hurt, try to play the victim. And that's what these two did. In all the cities in the world, this is the last one they should have done that in, because there's zero tolerance for weaklings in the city of New York, never mind liars. And that's what they are. What were they doing here? Why was she out that night, Miss Princess of Privacy? Because she wanted to accept yet another award from some far-left liberal, Gloria Steinem, supposedly the mother to us all. Oh, unless you actually don't believe in abortion on demand until the 9th month of pregnancy. So she wanted to give Meghan Markle an award, a Vision Award. You know what the award praised? I'll read it to you. They were thrilled to recognize Meghan's strength and resilience, critical to building a better world for our children. Her strength and resilience? What are you talking about? She had her PR people turn a little paparazzi attempt at getting her picture into a near catastrophe, asking everyone to feel sorry for her. She doesn't know the meaning of those words, strength and resilience. I certainly don't want my children looking to her for an example of any of that. So yes, I think she's lost what remaining little left-wing hangers-on she had.
I know, because Meghan, I've been thinking about this a lot over the past week after I heard that ridiculous speech, and I was thinking, what is Meghan Markle's cause? You know, for Princess Diana, it was the plight of eating disorders, specifically bulimia. It was the plight of AIDS victims who in the 80s were misunderstood. And later in her life, it was the plight of the landmine. You know, 3 areas where Princess Diana changed the world. What's Meghan Markle's cause? And I thought about it a lot. And actually, it's herself. There is no 100%. Cause apart from Meghan Markle.
That's exactly right. And what they say in the speech was her status as a cultural catalyst based on her core belief that representation matters. That's what? Huh?
What does it mean? What does it mean?
I have no idea. Her belief that she ought to be in more movies and more places, getting hundreds of millions of dollars while they complain about their castle being too small and about Harry's security not being exactly what he wants it to be. All of it is about entitlement. There, I rewrote it for you, Gloria Steinem. That's what she's actually about, entitlement. And him too. His lawsuit that he just lost in the UK is basically him saying, but I'm special and I want the rules to be broken for me. You know, it reminded me of a story I heard about them when they were really little. And they came over here, Dan, with their mother, Princess Diana, Harry and William did. And she brought them, you know, she was always trying to show them what normal people live like. And she brought them into a restaurant and they were looking at the menus and there were specials on the menu. And one of the kids, I think it was Harry, looked at her and said, "Are these because we're here?" And it was a cute story. She said, no, specials, everybody gets specials. It's not about you. Honestly, she needed to keep saying that to him. He still needs somebody to say that to him. It's not about you. It's not about how special you are. You actually just have to work. You're going to have to pay the money for the same security that Beyonce gets when she comes over here. She's a far bigger star than you are. And it plays into their, we want the photos that the paparazzi took of us. No, you're not entitled. That's not the way it works here. And while he may be English, she's American and she knows very well the property over here belongs to the person who takes the photograph, not to the whiner who just wants to make sure her makeup looked perfect in it.
Absolutely. And we always warned them this was the consequence of leaving. Meghan, it's 5 years since this couple got married. The Daily Telegraph revealed at the weekend that Harry is now regularly staying away from the Montecito mansion, which has 16 bathrooms, in some little hotel down the road. Do you think this marriage could be in trouble? Because why would he need to leave a mansion with 16 bathrooms? It doesn't really make sense, does it?
First of all, can you blame him?
Just some time away from that, yeah. No, I get you.
He is. I mean, on that one, hashtag Team Harry. Go, get out. It's just a matter of time. We all know that. I predict, I mean, I think we're probably under 7 years for the length of this marriage. That's just my, back of the envelope calculation. Because look, she's miserable. She's been miserable her whole life. I know somebody who knows her very well. And this person says she was miserable before she married him. She's miserable during the marriage, and she's going to be miserable after the marriage. She's ruined everything. She ruined the royal family. She ruined his life over there. He allowed it to happen because he had all this damage from his mother's death. I get it. But his only chance for happiness, in my view, is getting rid of her, getting away from her. And she'll probably land the plane with some American billionaire who will keep her in the manner to which she thought she was becoming accustomed when she married a prince and then had to settle for just, global fame and the crown jewels, which wasn't good enough for her because nothing ever is.
And Meghan, just a final quick word. Gayle King, she seems to want this interview, Oprah's best mate. She wants this interview with Harry and Meghan more than anything. Is she starting to damage her own credibility by constantly sucking up to this pair?
Yes, beyond repair. She actually said she was upset. It's unsettling that some are trying to minimize, this is how she put it, how Harry and Meghan felt in that moment in the fake car chase. No, we're not trying to minimize anything. We don't believe them. They lied. We believe they've suffered actually no upset whatsoever. They just wanted to paint themselves as victims, like she's another Diana, which she's not and never will be. And to the extent they felt any sort of a panic, I blame them. They overreact to everything. They freaked out over a man on a Vespa in their fake little movie they did for Netflix. So if they felt unsettled, that's on them. They need to learn how to be a little bit stronger, like the New Yorkers in whose city they were when they disparaged the paparazzi here.
Megyn Kelly, host of The Megyn Kelly Show, which you can find on YouTube. Thank you so much. We will speak next week. But coming up, as police divers search a Portuguese reservoir often visited by the #1 Maddie McCann disappearance suspect, is this a welcome new line of inquiry? Is it time to stop spending money on the search 16 years on? Well, Mark Williams-Thomas, he has expert insight and new information on this soon. But next, the Boris witch hunt continues as the former PM is referred to police again over a new COVID rule-breaking claim. So is it just time the woke blob and the MSM stop trying to finish off Boris's career? My superstar panel return to debate that shortly, plus a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the price to pay for patriotism. Deep state rabble-rousers already toppled Boris Johnson from power and throttled him in his political prime. So why are the dark forces of Britain's intolerant underbelly still gunning for the former PM in a fresh round of pathetic Partygate attacks? The twisted MSM has a new lockdown story to salivate over. But should cops ignore the woke blob's attempt to bury Bojo's career for good? Full details coming in the big debate with my superstar panel next. And tonight, I'm joined by Amanda Platel, John Sargent and Rebecca Reed. Plus, Harry and Meghan's week goes from bad to worse. After their New York car chase was globally exposed as nothing but a farce, the Duke of Sussex took another huge blow today after dramatically losing a high-profile court case against the UK government. So is this the beginning of the end for the rudderless Sussexes? Esteemed royal author Tom Bauer thinks so, and their ultimate downfall could be just weeks away. He'll reveal why in Uncancelled later this hour. And desolate Phillip Schofield receives probably the most damning critique yet in the wake of his sensational This Morning exit. Former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, the woman in charge of UK broadcasting until just a few weeks ago, wades into the row with a devastating rebuke that Scove should be kept away from other prestigious shows. So that's going to be debated in our media buzz soon. And it's been dubbed the best chance in years of solving the tragic Maddie McCann mystery. But top British detective Mark Williams-Thomas, the man who helped first expose Jimmy Savile, dramatically lashes out at German cops searching a Portuguese reservoir after accusing them of pulling a heartless PR stunt. His extraordinary revelations coming up shortly in my exclusive interview. And as Just Stop Oil goad another desperate motorist into taking drastic action. Were idle cops right to rough that poor guy up and shove him in handcuffs? And from one bunch of clowns to another.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
Does Ed Davies' fantasy that women can have penises give a flavour of the insanity to come under a Labour-Lib Dem coalition of chaos? We'll have tomorrow's newspaper front pages in minutes too, and find out which iconic birthday girl has been nominated for Greatest Britain as we reveal GB and Union Jackass before the night is out. But before all of that, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Boris Johnson has been referred to the police by the Cabinet Office over 2 new claims he broke lockdown rules during the pandemic. It's alleged his ministerial diary revealed friends made visits to Chequers between June 2020 and May 2021. The Metropolitan Police have also received a report of potential breaches of the health protection regulations in force at the time at Downing Street during the same period. Mr Johnson has written to the Cabinet Office denying rule breaking, and earlier Jacob Rees-Mogg says there are some people that will never rest until they've hounded Boris out.
I can tell you that during that period, I went to Chequers. I was invited there with my children, entirely in accordance with the rules. Another senior government minister was going to come, but the Prime Minister cancelled him because you were only allowed to have one family present at the time. So what would have been a meeting with the Prime Minister, the Chief Whip and the Leader of the House of Commons just had me there because you couldn't mix families. The Prime Minister was diligent about it.
Smog speaking earlier. Now, South Wales Police has referred itself to the policing watchdog after CCTV footage emerged showing one of the force's vans following 2 people on an e-bike before a fatal crash in Cardiff last night. The 2 teens that were killed have been named as Kyrie Sullivan, who was 16, and 15-year-old Harvey Evans. Violent unrest followed, in which 15 police officers were injured. South Wales Police has said a number of arrests have been made and there will be more to follow. A major search for Maddie McCann at a reservoir in Portugal was called off late today due to a severe thunderstorm. Dozens of Portuguese police have been searching the area all day following a tip-off. The area of interest is around 30 miles from where the 3-year-old first went missing 16 years ago. Scotland Yard officers are present with a watching brief, and sniffer dogs were seen on the reservoir's banks as the search progressed. It's understood nothing significant has been found on day 1 of the search. In the United States, former President Donald Trump will go on trial in March next year. Mr Trump appeared via video link at a hearing in New York today over charges he falsified business records to conceal money he paid to silence an adult film star called Stormy Daniels. He's pleaded not guilty to all criminal charges, claiming he's a victim of election interference. And ending on some slightly lighter news, GBNews has been named as Britain's most loved news brand in a top survey. GBNews topped the charts for the news in the highly regarded Brand Love study, which polls ordinary Britons for their views. And the People's Channel came out on top in a survey of 45,000 Britons. It's been ranked as more popular than other major news brands, including The Guardian, The Sun and The Daily Mail. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News. Back to Dan.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz, and let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages hot off the press. And the Eye leads with Boris Johnson being reported to police over new claims of lockdown rule breaking. We're going to be talking about this in just a moment. I've got a lot to say about it, and I completely agree with the Daily Express take on this, actually. They simply declare it's a stitch-up. The Metro leads on the death of Rolf Harris and claims that he had a secret funeral. He died 2 weeks ago and was cremated, the paper reports. My superstar panel return now. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platell, the legendary journalist John Sargent, and the best-selling author Rebecca Reed. Now, the never-ending witch hunt against ousted Prime Minister Boris Johnson exploded back into life tonight, with the Cabinet Office referring him to the police over fresh claims of lockdown rule-breaking. This time, Boris Johnson's ministerial diary proved the catalyst for new attacks, which is said to have documented a visit he and friends made to the country retreat of Chequers during the pandemic, although Jacob Rees-Mogg has said these visits took place throughout the pandemic following the rules. The Privileges Committee, which is continuing its original investigation into Johnson's crime, that terrible crime of eating crusty M&S sandwiches in Downing Street, have also been informed. And tonight, a fresh civil war at the top of government, with one minister telling the Daily Telegraph's political editor, Christopher Hope, soon to be of our parish, that the former PM is the victim of a stitch-up, and this latest episode in the witch hunt is an attack on democracy and due process. Now, Boris is hitting back too. Here's what his spokesperson has just said in the past hour. The events in question were all within the rules, either because they were held outdoors or came within another lawful exemption. They include regular meetings with civil servants and advisors. Many will conclude that this has all the hallmarks of yet another politically motivated stitch-up. In the same week that the out-of-control Whitehall blob conspired to bring down Suella Braverman, their original and perhaps most celebrated smear campaign continues to rumble on. And Amanda Platell, this is increasingly, and I know there are lots of Tory ministers and MPs on the right of the party, this is increasingly feeling like a witch hunt now against any MP that believes in Brexit, that wants to stop the boats, and they're coming for Boris to try and finish him off for good.
Well, we do have, Dominic Raab and then Suella Braverman now, and with Boris, it's just never ending. I mean, how many times do you have to harpoon a whale? I mean, the guy is politically dead at the moment. He's a backbench MP. And when, my abiding thought, Dan, when I heard this story break today, I just thought, first of all, I don't care about this anymore. And I think that we've got many more things to worry about. The fact that the junior doctors are still on strike, the fact that we've got almost everyone on strike at the moment, the economy is in the toilet, and yet they're going back onto these historic events. But it also drew a really strong memory for me about what those lockdowns were like and how we had a situation where the state told us they dictated every aspect of our life, what we had to wear in our faces,
which was always
what we had to. Remember, we used to have to wear gloves every time we went out, and it was never again. Never. All I was thinking when I heard this story is Boris was the only one who wanted to stop the lockdowns. He was the one who said that they're not necessary, and
but
he
again,
was overruled.
Look at the force that he was
fighting
against.
And his common sense during all of that. The guy had COVID himself, but just this overriding feeling that the state intervened into our lives in a way that they never have any right to do and will never do again. And now they just won't let go. To what end?
John Sargent, I've actually just got Amanda Platel's newspaper, the Daily Mail, in here, and they are carrying... Well, you like to look at it, right?
You're in charge.
It might as well be, Amanda.
And they are carrying a sensational development to the story, John, on the front page tomorrow. Boris Johnson has sensationally threatened to sue the government for giving his ministerial diaries to police without telling him.
Good on him, because they didn't even allow him to look at the documents before they sent them to the cops. Good on Boris.
He's fighting back.
Sorry, John. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm just totally attentive now.
No, that's good. Now, I tell you what, the bit that I think is interesting, which we haven't covered yet, which is if the civil service have been responsible, either individually or collectively, why? What is it? What's getting them going? And I'll tell you what I think is getting them going is they feel a change of government is coming next year. Whatever else they've got to do in career terms, it is not to be the person who covered up the latest Boris Johnson story. Now you've got to think that through. It does not mean, if you're in those jobs, they're very, very interested in proving to each other and to everybody else, look, we're being even-handed now. But shouldn't you...
wait a minute.
I know,
being even-handed.
but wait a moment.
I'm sorry, if they were being even-handed, then Keir Starmer would have been done for his beer and curry party. Remember that?
OK, look, bear me out. If they were accused, can you imagine the conversation, the Yes Minister conversation? I say, boy, I think we ought to cover up this stuff about Boris. We've got to give it because of the inquiry. But I think we should be careful about making sure it doesn't get out. And someone else...
Rebecca, this is a waste of police...
But wait a moment, this is how they act. If you've worked with civil servants, I've known a lot of them over the years, and they are particularly concerned, after 13 years, they are particularly concerned about changing government. That's all.
I very strongly believe that it is, and I hate when we talk about, like, the woke agenda. It's not that. It's that we have metrics about what people want to read. And in terms of digital journalism, the stories that performed best originally were the Boris Partygate things because it was an outrage story. I think what will happen now is, my instinct is that the interest is no longer there. I don't think people care very much anymore. We have short memories. There are other more pressing issues, as Amanda said. I think this will be the last one that captures the public. I don't think it will capture the public imagination.
Well, look, I want to move on to something that absolutely has captured the public's imagination today, and mine. Those cretins, absolute cretins at Just Stop Oil, goading motorists again. And I think what I'm about to show you is one of the clearest examples yet of all that is wrong with Britain today. So this is the moment a desperate builder trying to get to work was roughed up by police as those middle-class, champagne-swilling eco-zealots who don't have to go to work blocked traffic in central London yet again. Amanda, my blood boils when I see that, because the police allowed these eco-terrorists standing in the middle of a road, clearly breaking the law, and in the moment that bloke tries to clear the road, they go for him.
Dan, I have to completely disagree with you here, because I love that bloke.
I love him too.
I want to know if his dad's single. I mean, how courageous is he? He just boulders in there.
But I love him too.
Yeah, but you didn't. But
do that.
I know, I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it.
People. That's not how it works.
I absolutely love it.
But you can't just stand in the middle of roads.
Those two things are not the same thing.
If you deny people...
One of those is a protest, one of those is an attack.
It's not a protest.
Hitting people is
That's not a protest.
He didn't hit him, he just called him terrorist.
Look, I'm sure this guy will not be charged.
He hasn't been. He was not arrested.
He hasn't been charged.
He's investigating, though.
I know.
They said that
Dan,
I'm going to agree
with you on this. There's no doubt that the protesters, the Stop Oil people, were endangering public order.
Yes.
They were endangering
And the cops sided with them and not with the guy.
I know this. I'm in agreement. I am with him. They were, in fact, inciting people in cars and vehicles to, in fact, break the law.
And they're doing it time and again.
Yeah.
I am sick of it.
I will say what I say at home to my one-year-old. We do not hit. ever.
He didn't hit, he dragged.
Do not
What
hit.
about
He dragged.
do not
He
stand in the
dragged.
middle of
Agree.
roads and conduct campaigns of eco-terror? That would be a good message
I haven't
too.
thought that one home yet.
We should get him on the show.
We want to track him down. We want to track him
yeah?
down. John Sargent, my superstar panel. Stand by, OK? Because coming up, as former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries slams ITV for protecting Phillip Schofield for, quote, as long as possible, is she right to question why the broadcaster is still letting him host other prestigious shows? My superstar panel will return to debate that soon, and they have very different views on this one. But next, as police divers search a Portuguese reservoir often visited by the #1 Maddie McCann suspect, is this a welcome new line of inquiry, or is it just time to stop spending money on this search 16 years on? Well, ex-detective turned investigator Mark Williams-Thomas says this is just a speculative PR move. He's got exclusive insight in this straight after the break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Esteemed royal author Tom Bauer coming up, but time now for my exclusive with top detective Mark Williams-Thomas and the latest on Maddie McCann. And in a slither of fresh hope to Maddie's family today, German police began searching an old Portuguese reservoir in their latest bid to finally end the 16-year mystery into the toddler's disappearance. Officers were spotted this evening taking away a number of bags from the remote Algarve's search site as they focus on 4 specific areas of interest. The Germans have long insisted Madeleine was killed after going missing while on holiday in 2007, and their chief suspect, German national Christian Bruckner, is currently serving prison time for separate vile sex attacks. But as police divers began scouring the reservoir's murky waterbed today, the elite British detective who helped first expose Jimmy Savile has lashed out at German prosecutors for pulling what he slams as a meaningless PR stunt. Mark Williams-Thomas fears today's hunt is giving tragic Maddie's family false hope and says his own detective work into the McCann case, including a bombshell documentary into the prime suspect, proves the Germans are barking up the wrong tree. So, Mark, great to have you here tonight. Do you think the Germans are unnecessarily pulling at the heartstrings of the public and Madeleine's family with this search today?
Good evening, Dan. Well, it's never really been a communication between the Germans and the Jerry and Kate anyway. There's very little communication there. In fact, there's very little communication between any of the authorities. The British authorities and the Portuguese authorities don't believe the line that the Germans have taken. They've been very clear. 2020, the prosecutor, Walters, came out and said that he believed that Madeleine was abducted by Christian Bruckner and killed in Portugal. He's unable to say where her body is in Portugal, but he's adamant at that. And since then, he has been, for the last 3 years, trying to collect enough evidence to bring a prosecution against Christian Bruckner. He is a long way away from that. There is not any evidence that categorically puts him outside the apartment. Although he came out and said that, my investigation showed clearly that wasn't the case. And when we put it to him, he acknowledged that. The problem is with today's search, and obviously that started yesterday, it will last probably for the rest of the week. The chances of them finding anything in relation to Madeleine is, I would say, very, very slim. It's probably nothing at all, because that area, firstly, has been searched previously on 2 separate occasions, but also that dam, that area of the reservoir, has significantly reduced over the drought period, meaning the bank area was dry. Now, if you're going to dispose of a body in that water, unless you've got access to a boat, and Christian Bruckner would have to have done this in the spur of the moment, he wouldn't have access to a boat. There are no boats at the side of that. You'd have to put the body close to the water's edge, in which case, over the last 16 years, Madeleine's body would have been found. So this is, sadly, I think, a big PR exercise by the Germans. Yes, they're following up a line of inquiry because people have said Christian Bruckner did use that area, but he also used 3 other reservoirs. And in fact, when I was in Portugal 18 months ago, we visited those other reservoirs. She could just as well be in those other reservoirs if that's their line of pursuit. Unfortunately, I don't think she is in those reservoirs at all, and I think this is a wasted exercise.
So obviously this is going to be a very difficult week for the McCann family, but you think they will probably know that this is unlikely to lead to anything?
I mean, Jerry and Kate have been through this, been in this position multiple times now over the last 16 years. There's been a number of searches that have taken place. And of course, on each and every one occasions, they live on hope that it will give the answers. But they're very realistic that the chances of something like this are very, very slim. They'll have been given a certain amount of information by the British family liaison officers who work with them. But that information will be fairly limited. They, I'm sure, they won't be waiting and thinking, gosh, this is the bit that's going to turn it over. But they live in hope that one day, and we do know that major investigations, even decades, 20, 30 years on, I've just done an investigation 30 years on, and we found incredible new evidence. So the evidence does come forward years later. But sadly, I don't think this is it. This is about the German authorities, Mr. Walters, trying to keep the case alive, trying to keep the public involved in so much as giving their information.
Well, indeed. And I wanted to ask you about the public, Mark, because there's a real divide developing now, and every time I talk about Maddie on this show, I really sense that. There is a group in the public that are absolutely furious that millions and millions of pounds keep being thrown at this case. Scotland Yard detectives are in the Algarve for this search, so presumably that is costing more money. Do you think millions of pounds should continue to be spent every year in the search for Maddie McCann?
So there's a contrast here. Yes, I do. I believe that money should be spent with, for every single missing person. But when you put it into the context of all the other cases, it should equally be spent on those. And of course, that's not practical. So you get to a situation where you say, well, why is it that Maddie McCann's case is receiving more money than anything else? This is utterly unique. I've travelled the world. I've interviewed the most major crime, and there is no case that's similar to this. The Portuguese case it sits with, that's where she went missing. The British have got involved because she comes from Britain. Of course, the Germans have come involved because they claim that Christian Bruckner is responsible. There are hundreds. There's 3,000 unsolved murders currently in England and Wales. And of those cases, there are multiple families who have nothing done year on, year out in relation to their case. But there are millions of pounds being spent in relation to Madeleine's disappearance. Why are the British police over there? Ridiculous. I mean, whoever warranted that to allow the British police to go over for a search like this, absolutely out of order. The Portuguese can relay that information back to the British if it's necessary. There's absolutely no need for them to be there. It is wasted money. And the reality is sadly, they are no further forward. Millions and millions of pounds have been spent. They are no further forward than the 3rd of May 2007, where they are now.
So disturbing. Former top copper turned top investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas. I know you're staying on this case, and we look forward to hearing your developments on it. Thank you so much. But coming up in Uncancelled, with their New York car chase making them a laughing stock, their 5th wedding anniversary overshadowed by reports of a crumbling marriage, and Prince Harry tonight losing his legal bid to buy himself a private army of police. Has this been the worst week ever for the Sussexes' reputation, and how can they now try and recover it? Royal author Meghan's biographer Tom Bauer has the inside story very soon. But next in the media buzzers, former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries slams ITV for protecting Phillip Schofield for, quote, as long as possible. Is she right to question why they're still letting him host other prestigious shows? My superstar panel return to debate that in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Let me bring tonight's superstar panel back in. Top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, legendary broadcaster John Sargent and best-selling author Rebecca Reed. Now, ITV is coming under fire for its continued association with Phillip Schofield after he was ousted from his role as presenter on its flagship show this morning. Phil is set to host the Soap Awards next week, with the broadcaster fearing his involvement could spark a backlash. And Woke ITV is yet to confirm if Phil will continue to host Dancing on Ice when the show televises in January next year. Now, former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, who until a few months ago was tasked with handling the government's broadcasting policy, slammed ITV for how it's dealt with the Schofield fallout in a bombshell column today in the Daily Mail. Dorries wrote, "As for ITV, it looks to me as though the channel was most concerned with protecting Schofield's reputation and its own for as long as possible. And there are still many questions to ask about this case, not just of Schofield and what he might have done that could have led to his departure. There are also questions for ITV executives and this morning editor Martin Frizzell. What have they known about Schofield? For how long? And why are they letting him host other prestigious shows?" Rebecca Reed, I thought this was a very powerful intervention from the former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, and I think she makes a very fair point, don't you?
I think it's a very difficult conversation because, as she speculates about, it's unknown, right? These are internal conversations. We don't know exactly how the relationship with Phil and Holly broke down. We don't exactly know what's going on. But I can see that if he's not allowed to host this morning, then it doesn't make sense that he'd be able to host anything else. And I sort of feel like he, and I don't think he will, should have the dignity to be like, do you know what? I had a lot of great years. I had the best job in television, and now I'm going to tastefully step back. He's made a lot of money. He could do something else, but I think he's going to make their life really difficult.
Well, he's furious.
Yeah, and I can see why, but because he's the kind of person who gets furious. Right? But you'll notice that when, and I'm sorry to bring him up, Amanda, but when Piers went from Good Morning Britain...
Piers Morgan.
Yes.
Why are you sorry to bring that up?
Because...
Your ex-TV.
Because he's your ex-boyfriend.
It wasn't like my boyfriend.
It was more serious than that.
Yeah, much more serious than boyfriend. Boyfriend's a tenner penny. But you'll notice that the people who worked below him and around him did not line up to kick him. And here you are seeing that people are lining up to take shots at Phil because he hurt people, I think I've heard he wasn't very nice to people on the way up.
No, he wasn't. John Sargent, I mean, you know Phillip Schofield, good guy, bad guy?
Well, I amazingly was on the Soap Awards. I once gave an award in the Soap Awards, so I can't say we're that close as people, but he was on it, of course, and I thought he was pretty cold and totally lacking any interest in me and what I might be doing.
That's outrageous.
But that's consistent.
You can't believe it, can you?
That is just unbelievable.
But every single person who works for Phillip Schofield says this.
On the serious point, where I think Nadine Dorries is wrong is the assumption that somehow we must know, we must be told. This doesn't really work with a private company and someone they employ. The assumption that it's all sort of like a public office, you know, it's like being in the cabinet or being Prime Minister. I think people are getting confused about this.
OK, but what about morally, though? Because ITV have painted this picture to us for such a long time of ITV being happy families. We were meant to buy into this concept.
Of course, that's what you've got. But that's what you've got.
And actually, it's a nest of vipers. They hate each other. They're backstabbing each other. So we don't have a legal right to know, but surely as viewers we have a moral right to know.
No, because in fact the ITV have got to keep their mitts up. They're in difficulty over this. They were astonished at the way that people turned off the programme. They thought the publicity would be good for the programme, good for them. Now, I think they're obviously in some disarray over this, but the idea that what they should do is to make some pronouncement, some definitive pronouncement about what he did and what they thought of it, well, that seems to me like a crazy thing for a media company to do. I'd be horrified if I was working for ITV and I thought any moment they might turn around and say, well, actually, let's tell that I worked for them, I was their political editor. I don't want them at the end of my time to say, now, John Sargent, we can now tell you the truth. He was appalling, or he was this or that. No, you want a certain amount of loyalty even when you're leaving them.
But I think the thing about them is that for a lot of people, they're more influential than politicians. They're in your home every day. They feel like family members to a lot of people who watch it religiously. So people feel like he's kind of abandoned them and they want
But it was always a farce. The whole thing was always a farce. We all knew what Phillip Schofield was about. But Amanda Patel, I've been talking this week about how it's fascinating that no one high profile wants to speak out and defend Phillip, but I believe you do.
Well, Dan, I've got to say, the guy hasn't committed any crimes. I'm a big fan of Nadine's, and, you know, I respect her opinion in the paper today. But I think the real snake in the grass here has been Holly and the people behind her.
Really?
And they went out after him. I'm not saying he's an angel. I've never worked for him. I've done a few shows, but basically, Holly was the one. She came, and we all think she says, "Oh, just this really cute little thing. I'm like Doris Day, modern time," and actually she calculatingly went after him,
but maybe for very good reason. From what I'm told, for very good reason. Yes,
the very good reason was searing and naked ambition.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's that time and time again we see a man does something wrong and a woman takes the fall or gets the blame.
And she wasn't prepared to do that.
And I think she's smart.
She saw what was potentially coming down the road and she made a decision. And maybe this actually makes her a powerful woman that we should respect. She decided, I'm not going to have my career dragged down by this bloke.
Look, she was riven and driven by ambition. Let's just see how this plays out, OK? I'm not going to say anything untoward. I'm not going to step over any markers here. All I can see from her and what I know from what's happened is that she is like the Rishi Sunak of daytime TV. And I bet you anything, her next line on TV will be very sharp knives.
Well, but then you get that with all ambitious people, don't you?
What's wrong with being ambitious?
I'll tell you what I didn't like. I watched the programme when they came on and tried to be friendly, and I thought, oh, God, you know, this isn't going to work. And the other thing, which
it was
of course,
obvious
people
they hated each other by the end.
Yeah, it was. Well, I just thought, it's just.
But if
people can see it.
What I don't get in this is, if you've been friends for 20 years, right, and you've been mates, you holiday together, you spend Christmases together, you may fall out, but.
Yeah, but
a good person does not betray.
No, because if somebody's going to tank your career, if you have worked, and she has worked incredibly hard.
Oh, yeah,
she's a 42-year-old woman still on breakfast television. That is not easy.
Rebecca, may I say that I think friendship is more important than a career?
Really?
But this has been...
I don't know.
Amanda, this has been a four-year fallout. This has been a four-year fallout. She saw what was coming. She saw the way that he treated other people. And finally, she decided, I am not prepared to stand by and watch that rubbish go on. And I praise her for that.
Frosty Holly and the way she treated women on that show. OK, they've been...
Oh, yeah, she's icy. She's not a friend.
She is
but
let's not be painting her as a saint.
But also...
You don't have to be nice.
But isn't this also... It's another piece of... It's high politics, though, isn't it? And at Westminster, the old thing is, you don't have friends in politics, you can have allies.
Yes, indeed.
Are we allies?
And you certainly...
We're allies and we're close friends.
certainly cannot have friends, believe me, working at ITV Daytime. Do you know what? I've worked in some of the toughest newsrooms in the world, you know, News of the World, The Sun. Nowhere is full of more backstabbers or more hateful people than ITV daytime.
But we're friends, right?
We're here.
Like, genuinely, everyone is actually mates.
Rebecca, we're evening.
We're best friends.
In a bid for relevance and not content with their numerous failed attempts to undo Brexit, the Lib Dems now appear to be joining Labour on its chilling crusade against women. So this is the moment their bumbling leader, Ed Davey, echoed Keir Starmer's backwards belief today that women can have a penis. Watch.
Vast majority of people whose biological sex is a woman when they were birth, they feel they're women, so they get the same they feel their gender the same as at birth. But there's a very small number of people who don't feel like that.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
OK, quite clearly, can a woman have a penis, Amanda?
No, I don't have one. I'm a woman.
John, can a woman have a penis?
No, certainly not.
Rebecca Reid?
Trans women can have penises.
So he's right.
Trans women can have penises.
So you're agreeing with what he's saying?
I think that trans women can have penises.
They can't have a penis.
Trans women can have penises.
They can't have a penis.
But can a woman have a penis?
Rebecca,
That was the question he said.
Trans women can have penises.
But can a woman have a penis?
A trans woman can, yes.
But what about
a trans woman
a woman?
A trans woman is a kind of woman.
A kind of what
So
kind
you
of
agree
woman?
a trans woman is not a woman, though?
It's a different kind of woman from a cis woman.
Fair enough.
A different kind of woman from a cis woman.
Rebecca Reid, John Sargent, Amanda Patel. We got more sense there than out of Ed Davey. But coming up, after Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, I love this, twice deletes a tweet showing her flying business class at a cost of nearly £4,000, just weeks after a party attacked Rishi Sunak spending on travel. Has she just exposed the champagne socialists in the Labour Party for what they really are? She's going to feature as we crown tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next, and uncancelled, with their New York car chase making them a laughing stock, their 5th wedding anniversary overshadowed by reports of a seriously in trouble marriage, and Harry losing his legal bid to buy himself private protection tonight from the Met. Has this been the worst week ever for the Sussexes' reputation, and can they now recover it? Royal author Meghan's biographer Tom Bauer, he has the inside story in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's time now for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And breaking tonight, Prince Harry has been denied the right to bring a second legal challenge against the Home Office over its refusal to let him pay for Met Police as his security. The Duke argued his offer to fund his own security using the Met Police should have prompted the government to quash and retake its decision, but the court ruled that privately funded police protection was not in the public interest. The Home Office had previously slammed Harry's bid, saying their officers aren't guns for hire. The latest High Court ruling keeps the pressure on the Duke and Duchess of Delusion after the international humiliation the couple suffered when their make-believe car chase through New York was exposed as an overblown farce. And hapless Harry is due back in court again soon, with the Duke due to give evidence next month over his phone hacking claim against the Daily Mirror. So to talk about the latest Sussex woes, I'm delighted to be joined by the celebrated royal biographer, a biographer of Meghan Markle, Tom Bauer. So, Tom, you think, while this has been a bad week, things could actually be about to get worse?
Absolutely, Dan. I mean, as we predicted last week, he was going to lose the case against the government. He has a second case against the government, which I'm sure he'll lose too. And then he comes up for cross-examination. And one's got to hope that Andrew Green, who's representing the Mirror, is really going to give Harry a pasting like as if he's never had before. Because what I see really happening at the moment is the crumbling of the magic and mystery of Harry, the whole beginning, really, the end of his reputation. At the moment, there's nothing nice about Harry. There's nothing you actually warm to. He's sort of a cliché of a ghost of something quite unpleasant. And that hysterical outburst in New York just showed, really, how the man has become somewhat unbalanced because, you know, this was a rather tawdry award. It wasn't any award of any importance. It's all done to up the glory of Meghan and make Gloria Steinem an ancient relic, quite self-important as well. And they go out the back entrance. And what's really interesting about that car chase is, I don't know if you follow this, but the same agency that was mounted this ridiculous chase. Are the same agency who Meghan was cooperating with in California on Coronation Day for that hiking shot. So it seems to me that somehow Backgrid got angry that they weren't being given the opportunities to do the right photographs at the award ceremony in New York, and then decided they were going to get their own back because it didn't make sense, had enough pictures of Meghan and Harry. And the whole thing is so tawdry. And why were they running? And why didn't they just go, as usual, to the Carlisle Hotel? I'm told the Carlisle not only wouldn't give them a good deal, but was quite keen for them not to come anymore. Right. Because wherever they go, they cast a bad shadow over the whole escapade, as they have, of course, on that awards ceremony with Steinem, because Steinem was hoping to get great publicity for her third-rate organisation, and instead all the publicity went on the Sussexes and their car chase. And very often one hears in California that they're not invited to Hollywood parties or something because they just bring with them the danger of the whole thing being about them. And the other thing which I found really interesting in this whole last week is the silence of Meghan. There's all Harry. Just like when he was promoting his book, just like when he was arguing about the coronation, Meghan stays silent. She is using Harry to fight her battles, but she is keeping her voice off camera. And that is very interesting because she clearly is building up to something quite big. So whatever happens now, Harry has lost all the advantages he had, all the glamour he had, all the credibility he had, and is riding now for the next big fall, which must be the cross-examination in the Mirror case.
And he thinks that is going to be a moment of transformation, a moment where he starts to bring down the British media. But he also thought that was going to be the case when they released that ridiculous statement last week. And it does show you, Tom, doesn't it, what happens now that he doesn't have royal advisors around him actually saying, don't be so ridiculous.
Well, what he doesn't understand is that he, of course, in the Mirror case, wants to attack the palace, the king, Prince William, and all of them for briefing against him. What he doesn't realise is the judge will have no quip for this. He'll say to him, Prince Harry, this is a case against the Daily Mirror, not against Buckingham Palace. Now, where's your evidence against the Daily Mirror? And so far, Smearman Sherborne, the man acting for Harry, a smarmy lawyer, has totally failed in 3 weeks to produce any evidence. We haven't seen a knock-up, which is not surprising at all.
Given his track record.
Exactly.
Yeah, Harry's got himself in with the wrong people, but that's because he's very easily influenced, isn't he? Now, look, 5th-year wedding anniversary for Harry and Meghan seems incredibly unhappy. I mean, neither of these two are happy. Meghan has never been happy. Harry certainly hasn't been happy since he moved to Montecito. What do you make of these reports that on some nights he's staying away at a different hotel nearby? It seems weird, doesn't it, when you've got a mansion with 16 bathrooms?
Yeah, no, I think there's... You see, the people who reported that were clearly in a battle with Harry. I mean, what's happening really is, which everyone should know, there's a briefing war going on. There's a briefing war about Harry, a briefing war about Andrew, a briefing war about in favour of Princess Anne, all the time. And papers are very keen, rightly, to want to reflect all those stories. But I find it very hard to believe that he's hiding away in a hotel room. After all, he's got a cottage on that estate. He can easily, and does go with quite often there to smoke his weed. So I don't believe that. What I do believe is that he was happy at the beginning in California. I think that it was a terrific relief for him to paddle in the Pacific. But I think now the reality is closing in. I think now he's finding that he's not getting his way. And in the end, what's interesting is, you know, there's no new Netflix contract, no announcement of new Spotify series, no new book has yet been apparently commissioned. What are they going to do? Where's the money going to come from?
Apparently, Meghan's getting another award this week, another spurious made-up award. That's it. That's it at the moment. Look, you mentioned Andrew, and there is a briefing war going on between Andrew and King Charles at the moment over his lodge, the Royal Lodge on the Windsor estate. Andrew doesn't want to leave. Does the King just need to toughen up here, or should he let his brother stay at the house that the Queen said he would be in for the rest, the late Queen, that is, said that he would be in for the rest of his life?
Well, I think that he can't afford it. That's Andrew's problem. It's going to cost more than $1 million a year.
Which Charles knows.
And he says, I'm not letting public money be spent on keeping you one man in this vast mansion. Frogmore is big enough for you. But, of course, what Andrew is doing, he's got a very, very shrewd, clever publicist in London who is feeding the Telegraph and other papers all this sob story, and how tomorrow I think the Mail's got a story about how Andrew is being sent food parcels from Windsor, which doesn't look like the King is angry with him. But that's not the point. The point is, of course, he'll eventually leave. But, you know, he doesn't understand reality, never has understood. And the King, of course, played it badly. He played it badly with Harry, he played it badly with Andrew, and that's the problem. He just doesn't clamp down on them hard enough.
No, indeed, he doesn't. It's getting even more messy, Tom Bauer. So we'll see where it ends up next week. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. And my superstar panel return. Amanda Patel, who's your nominee for tonight's Greatest Britain?
Happily, Dan, it is Dame Joan Collins, who turns 90 today.
90?
I know. I know her a little, and I know that despite 5 marriages and hundreds of movies, not all of them good, and being on Broadway and everything else, everything life has thrown at her, she's just been brilliant. And her motto is, I think all of us should think about this, when life throws you lemons, make lemonade.
I think...
Happy birthday, Joan.
Yeah, I think she's one of the most incredible British women. I really do. I think she is an absolute
She was an 80s
legend.
icon, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean,
love
she
her.
should have got a medal for the weight of sequins she wore in her shoulder pads.
And also very politically brave, has taken lots of positions that have put her out of favour with the liberal elite, and she is just brilliant. I can't believe she's 90 as well.
I know.
She looks so much
And she doesn't look
younger than
anything
that.
like it. I saw
And
it
she
a few
lives
weeks
such
ago.
a busy life too. Amazing. John Sargent, your nominee.
Graham Souness, the football manager, you know, the brilliant football manager, says he's going to swim the Channel for charity, but he's doing this at the age of 70. Now, That seems to me quite a task. I hope he does it, but most people who swim the Channel end up swimming not 20 miles, but about 40 miles. It's a heck of a thing to take on.
Yeah, indeed. Rebecca Reid, your nominee?
Mine is Prince Harry. I think that it's very brave to be fighting to be able to pay for his own security when he is here. He clearly needs security, and I think he has every right to have the argument.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
I knew how that was going to go down.
I mean, he doesn't. This is the consequence of leaving the royal family. If Harry gets security, then why does Bill Gates not get security? Why does Mark Zuckerberg not security? Why does Beyonce not get security?
Because Beyonce chose to be famous. Bill Gates chose to be famous. Prince Harry was born into the royal family.
Believe me, Rebecca Reid, Harry is choosing to be famous.
He could not make himself
He is
not a
choosing to be famous now. But the winner, let's not sully this great moment. Dame Joan Collins at 90 years old. Oh, there I was with her. I love that woman.
It's all about you, Dan.
I absolutely love her. No, I'm just very surprised to see that picture. I love her. Union Jackass time now, Amanda Patel.
OK, mine is Rachel Reeves, the shadow, what is she?
Chancellor.
Chancellor, who was caught sending a picture of herself on BA flight over to New York to trump up business for Labour when they got into power.
Yeah, when she was absolutely slamming Rishi Sunak for spending all of that money on travel. She was the ultimate champagne socialist. £4,000 flight. John Sargent, your nominee.
I hadn't finished.
Oh, sorry, Amanda.
I would want a refund if I was sat next to Rachel Reeves on a flight.
Yes. John Sargent, your nominee.
OK, well, now, it's an honorary one. It's a foreigner, an evil foreigner, Evgeny Prigozhin. You might know who's that. He's the head of the Wagner Russian military group that has just claimed victory in Bakhmut. And, of course, it wasn't a victory because they destroyed the whole place. He's an evil man.
Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Dominic Raab, delighted to see him go, but a bit wet that he couldn't fight an election.
Oh, how kind of you.
That's so mean.
I just think it's a bit wet. Like,
I think Dominic Raab was an excellent cabinet minister, and he's a big loss for Rishi Sunak. But of course, I'm going for Rachel Reeves, the ultimate champagne socialist, on a £4,000 flight to New York. Goodness me. Amanda Patel, John Sargent, Rebecca Reid, my fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much. Thank you for your company tonight. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Headline is up next, though. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are. We don't shout, we chat.